I certainly remember when war was declared, I was with my mother, and I think we were expecting the announcement, and we had the wireless. We heard the Prime Minister state that we were at war with Germany. And very shortly after that, the siren went off. And we've been told that when the siren went off, we were going to be bombed. In fact, that didn't happen so early on in the war as that, but it was quite a scary moment.
The particular day that the war started, I was in Yorkshire. The announcement, in a very, very solemn way, was made, and everybody then, the mood just was flattened, and people were very sad, and it was such a terrible moment for them. For me, as a 10-year-old, I couldn't quite take it in. The atmosphere was sad and it was very down. Then my uncle, who was in probably 22 or 23, said, "Oh, come on, Jean, let's go for a walk." So we went along the road, and he met up with a number of his friends who were much the same age, and the mood was completely different, because these young men said, "Oh yes, we're going to fight, and we'll beat them, and we'll beat the Germans." So the difference between just after the announcement and these young men meeting, you could feel it.
You never forget the sound of that siren. Better when the all clear went.
I remember we lived just a few doors away from my grandparents, and they had a shelter in their garden. And so when the bombing started, the Blitz, we went and stayed in that shelter. And I went down there with my mother and father, and my grandpa was there, and he said, "I'm just going to go up now," because he could hear bombing. He really could. It was very loud. And I followed him up and just stood there and held his hand and just looked round, and he said, "Look at the sky." And it was so red. I mean, I knew that something was on fire. And then he said to me, he said, "They've got the docks. They're bombing the docks tonight." And they were. And they went on and on. And it was, it was something that always stayed with me.
Well, there were some dreadful experiences. To start off, I was 13 when it started.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 15, we were being bombed. I had lots to think of and put up with.
Was that something that affected people that were very close to you as well, or was it?
Yes, my stepmother, who was a very nice lady, was killed.
Yeah.
She was killed in Kingsway, London, going from one office to another.
Yeah.
And she was killed outright. So I lost my stepmother.
Well, I think, looking after other people as well and doing what you could for them, because I think that's what happened with our family. And we got to know quite a lot of the neighbours then, because we just helped each other.
There is only one thing to do, and that is to pray to God about it and say your prayers and just keep going.
Well, after the war, a number of people came back from having been fighting, and I think some of them were wounded. But I do remember one friend of my grandmother's who had a son who was missing. And I just felt for this lady because she kept his bedroom just as it had been, and he never came back. And it was all those things of people coming back at the end of rationing, because food had been very short, and there were no bananas for the whole of the wartime.
I think there was a spirit of togetherness, a common purpose, that we had to win the war, and that carried us through. We became resilient in many ways, and I think that's been a good lesson throughout our lives.
Well, the first thing I remembered was hearing the Bible stories at school, and they were very keen that we should read those and talk about them. And I loved them. I absolutely loved them. And I used to go home and tell them to my parents, say we had this one today or that one. And also every night I used to get on my knees by my bed and I would say my prayers, and I did that every night.
I had difficulty in going to church, so I had to keep my friendship with the Lord, or my love of the Lord, between him and me, because being a nurse, I couldn't go to church on Sundays. I always said my prayers every night. It encouraged me a lot because I had faith in Jesus, and I knew Jesus was looking after me.